Alrighty, boys and girls, welcome to our video lesson. We take a little detour into a little Algebra 2. We're going to do a lesson called Completing the Square. Okay, you're going to spend a lot more time on this next year, but we are going to look at a method for solving a quadratic equation. A quadratic equation, of course, has an x squared in it, where this is a method other than factoring. It's a second method that you can use to solve a quadratic equation. It's called completing the square. Your steps are right here. 1. Move the c term to the other side. 2. Divide every term by a. In other words, if there's a number in front of the x squared, divide all the terms by that number. Divide the b term by 2. In other words, find b over 2. Square that number and add it to both sides. Take the square root of each side. Don't forget a plus or a minus. And then we're going to solve for x. So we will go through that process. Okay, let's look at this first problem right here. I got x squared minus 8x minus 20 is equal to 0. Let's just solve this by factoring for a moment. I can see that I have nothing in front of the x squared, so that makes my life easier. My c term is negative, so I'm going to look for factor pairs of 20 that have a difference of 8. So I'm going to just quickly list out my factor pairs of 20. I got 1 and 20. I got 2 and 10. I got 4 and 5. Which one of those pairs has a difference of 8? Well, I can see right away. It's 2 and 10. So I'm going to build my houses. Whoop, 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 whoop. And that's equal to 0. I have x and x. I got 10 and 2. And because my b term is negative, I'm going to do minus 10 and plus 2. So now I know that x plus 2 is equal to 0, or x minus 10 is equal to 0. And solving both of those equations for x, I get x equals neg 2, or x equals positive 10. Okay, we're going to solve this equation again right now, but this time we're going to complete the square. I can remember that our answers were negative 2 and 10. So we're going to complete this square. So my first step is to move the c term, that's the negative 20, and move that to the other side. So I'm going to add 20 to both sides. So now I have x squared minus 8x. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add a blank is equal to 20, and then add the blank to the other side too. Whatever I do to one side, I must do to the other. Our next step now is to divide all the terms by the a. Well, the a in this case was 1. I have 1x squared. So that's nice that I don't need to do that step at all. My next step is to look at the b term. Okay, my b is negative 8. So I'm going to take that negative 8 and divide it by 2. I get negative 4. Negative 4. I'm going to square that. Negative 4 squared is 16, and I'm going to add that into both of my blanks. So I'm adding 16 into both of my blanks. So now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to go back to blue or something. I'm looking at the left-hand side. I have x squared minus 8x plus 16. That I know is x minus 4 times x minus 4, which is x minus 4 squared. That's equal to 20 plus 16, which is 36. I'm going to take the square root of both sides. The square root of x minus 4 squared, of course, is x minus 4. And the square root of 36 is plus or minus 6. I'm now going to solve for x. Add 4 to both sides. So what I have here is I have x equals positive 6 plus 4, which equals 10. Hey, that's the same number we had up here. Or I have x equals negative 6 plus 4, which is negative 2, which is the same number we had up here. So you can see now I get the same answers. Okay, our next problem here is x squared minus 6x plus 8. Why don't you guys go ahead and solve that by factoring? Take a quick second here and solve that by factoring. You're going to build a house and a house and set that equal to 0. Go ahead, stop the tape and figure out what you get. Okay, you should have found that you have x equals 2 or x equals 4. We look at our original problem, x squared minus 6x plus 8 is equal to 0. When I factor that, I'm going to make the factor pairs of 8 are 1 and 8 and 2 and 4. The fact that my c term is positive means my two factor pairs must add up to be negative 6. So I have x minus 2, x minus 4 equals 0. So therefore x minus 2 is 0, which means x is 2, or x minus 4 is 0, which means x is cuatro. Okay, to solve this guy by completing the square, first thing we're going to do, we're going to move our c term to the other side. That's minus 8, so I'm going to minus 8 on both sides. So I'm left with x squared minus 6x. I'm going to add that blank, and that's equal to negative 8 plus my blank once again. My a was 1. We can see here there's a 1 in front of the x squared, so I don't need to do anything more. Just dividing by 1 doesn't do anything. So I'm going to take my b term, which is neg 6. Half of neg 6 is neg 3. I'm going to take that number and square it, and I'm going to add that to both sides of my equation. Negative 3 squared is 9, so I'm going to add 9 to both sides. So now what I have here, as you can see, I have x squared minus 6x plus 9 is equal to negative 8 plus 9. Well, this I'm hoping you recognize as x minus 3 squared. And that's equal to negative 8 plus 9, which is 1. I'm going to take the square root of both sides, and we'll do that in yellow. See if that, ooh, comes out nice. The square root of x minus 3 squared and the square root of 1. The square root of x minus 3, let's go to black, is x minus 3, the square root of x minus 3 squared is x minus 3, and the square root of 1 is plus or minus 1. Add the 3 to both sides, so x equals 1, positive 1 plus 3, which equals 4, or negative 1 plus 3, which equals 2. And that is the same answer as we got before, 4 or 2. Alrighty, let's look at this guy right here. We have x squared minus 8x plus 11 is equal to 0. You'll notice that this is not even factorable, so the only choice we have to solve this problem is to complete the square. So I'm going to move my 11 from both sides. I have x squared minus 8x plus blank is equal to negative 11 plus blank. I can do the things I've been doing all along. I can divide by my a term. Well, the a is 1 once again, which makes my life easier. Don't need to do that step. I'm going to take my b, which is negative 8, divide it in half. I get negative 4. And I'm going to take that number and square it. Neg 4 squared is 16. Add it to both sides. I have x squared minus 8x plus 16, which I'm hoping you recognize as x minus 4 squared, and that's equal to negative 11 plus 16, which is 5. I'm going to take the square root of both sides, do that in blue. So now I have the square root of x minus 4 squared is x minus 4, and that's equal to plus or minus the square root of 5, which, hey, folks, is the square root of 5. And now, quite simply, I'm going to add 4 to both sides. So x is equal to positive radical 5 plus 4, or negative radical 5 plus 4. And there are my two answers. All right, chicos y chicas, let's do the last one right here. X squared plus 3x minus 18. This is a little bit different now because we see our b is an odd number. That's going to make things a little bit yuckier. But you know what? This is factorable, so I'll let you guys factor it real quick. Go ahead and factor it and write down your answer. Alrighty, you should have found when you factored it, you got x plus 6 times x minus 3 is equal to 0. Which means x is either negative 6 or positive 3. Just hold on to those answers. Let's see if we get the same answer when we solve it by completing the square. Okay, to complete the square, what is my first step? What is my first step? Yes, you know it is. What is my first step? That is right. We're going to add the 18 to both sides. So now I have x squared plus 3x plus blank is equal to 18 plus blank. Again, notice I've added that blank to both sides. A is 1. That's nice. We're just going to divide everything by 1 so nothing happens. Then my next step is to take my b term, which in this case is 3. Take that 3, divide it in half, you get 3 halves, and we're going to take that 3 halves and square it. And yes, when the b term is an odd number, you end up with a fraction, which is okay. 3 halves squared is 9/4. I would suggest to you work with fractions. It's much easier than working with decimals. So we're going to add 9/4 to both sides. Here's the whole beauty of this now. On the left-hand side, we're going to have x plus 3 halves squared. That's what this turns out to be. It's a perfect square. Hence we call this completing the square. And that's equal to, now 18 is going to be, get a common denominator, is going to be 18 times 4 is 72/4 plus 9/4. That's equal to 81/4. 72 plus 9. So now let's take the square root of both sides. We'll do that in yellow. Whoop. Whoop. The square root of x plus 3 halves squared, of course, is x plus 3 halves. And that's equal to plus or minus the square root of 81/4, which is 9 halves. So I'm going to subtract the 3 halves from both sides. So x equals positive 9 halves minus 3 halves, which equals 6 halves, which equals 3. Or do this in yellow, or x equals negative 9 halves minus 3 halves, which of course is negative 12 halves, which equals neg 6. And notice now we have once again the same answers, negative 6 and positive 3. That's it, folks. We'll see you soon. Have a great night.